Okay, I think we can get started then. Do we have everybody on here? Sorry, I'm double checking to make sure we have everyone.
I think so.
Uh,
Guys, you can unmute yourself, so you will appear here.
Well, okay, so I think we'll do what we did yesterday, where I'll go through in the order that we have on the slide here and just ask each person to introduce themselves and just give kind of their thoughts on these opening questions, or anything to do with these opening questions, just a sort of little opening bit, and then we can have a little bit more of a free-for-all with the questions and answers. So Guilhem, can we start with you?
Hello, yes, my name is Guilhem Molines. I'm the lead architect for the IBM Decision product. And I did think about your questions. I do actually have one slide per question. I don't know if you want us to show a slide or you want just to talk through it. It's up to you. You want me to share screen and show a slide, or just?
So I wasn't really planning to show. How many of you have slides that you want to show? It's like, I don't know if anybody else have slides?
Oh,
looks like Gary might as well. Oh, okay.
All I have is words on it, no pictures, so it's
okay. So the way we have the meeting set up is I need to make you a co-host in order to do that. So I'll make you a co-host, and then anybody else who needs to be able to share slides can be a co-host as well. So I've made you a co-host, and you can share your screen.
Do you see my screen actually?
You have to click share screen button.
All right.
Green button.
You know what?
Downstairs.
Yeah, Zoom doesn't want to let me share screen on the Mac. So don't forget it. Let's not waste time. Okay, never mind. So just to answer your question though. So you said the first question was, what is one advance with your product that has a potential to change the world, right? Something like that. I don't remember the exact sentence of the question, but basically that's what you meant. So I want to mention the Mayflower Autonomous Ship project, which is a project started by a company in UK that has built a ship. I wanted to show you the picture of the ship, obviously, that has built a ship that will self-navigate across the Atlantic. So that ship has no crew on board. There's nobody, actually there's not even space for crew on board. It's a solar powered electrical engine. And the ship is built in with what they call an AI captain, which is basically software driving the ship, taking the right decision to avoid collisions and pick up the right path to cross the Atlantic. The ship has been relaunched at sea. It made the first attempt and ran into a mechanical issue earlier this year, but it still traveled 4 nights long as well, with the software running perfectly. And it's been repaired and it's going to be sent again across the Atlantic. And it combines various technology, including decisions to decide about the route to take to avoid collisions when other ships are around, or when it has to cross the channel, or when there are, icebergs, things like that they need to avoid. So the technology to decide how to avoid the collisions and how to steer the ship by abiding by the maritime law and by being smart enough to not run in trouble is actually done with rules. So it's not a very typical use case, and I wanted to mention it because I think it's a good answer to your question. It's a very interesting and non-classical use case that I think is very interesting for the future of scientific exploration at sea. All right, so that's my answer number one.
Okay.
And you want to comment on that, or do I keep going?
No, I'm just kind of wanted everybody to have a little chance to just kind of speak a little bit, so that we get an idea of just your thoughts on what's been happening and what you see is happening in the future. So it's a very, very interesting potential use case.
Yeah. And it's a good segue into your second question, actually, because one of the success of this software is that we managed to combine ML models for classifying the targets that the cameras of the ship or the radars, etc., can see, and rules to decide what to do with it. And that's exactly the type of capability that we've added recently into our offering this year, which is a way to combine prescriptive logic and predictive logic, where you can, within the text of a rule, you can type statements such as, you can type something such as let's pick an example of the typical loan application case. You can type a rule that would read, if the applicant credit score is low and the applicant is a platinum customer, the typical kind of condition that we see in rules. And you would also add, and the applicant propensity to churn is high, then accept the application, right? Or something like that. And the point is that this statement, the applicant propensity to churn, is actually the result of the invocation of a predictive score. So we mix prescriptive logic and predictive logic into the same sentence in a seamless way that is easy to use for people who are used to type rules or decision tables. They can use those conditions, even though the conditions are not directly rule conditions, but are invocation of an external ML model that has been trained for some purpose. So we've added many capabilities, and I don't want to, I don't know how much time I have, but I could talk for the whole hour if you let me. So if I'm given just a chance to mention just one capability.
I won't let you, but
that's probably the most important one, this capability to combine prescriptive logic and predictive logic. And it's something that we see in the industry happening all the time, especially in the use case that I mentioned just earlier. So I think it's a good example of a good application.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure.
And I see, Larry, you were able to join us. That's great. So it's before we even got to your name in the list. So good timing. Alan, you're up next. You want to tell us a little bit about what's been happening with your customers and products in the past year, and what sort of things you're going to be adding in the future?
Yeah, sure. Just to clarify, FICO products cover a very broad spectrum, sort of analytics optimization, rules, governance, facilities, all sorts of stuff, and specific domains as well, like fraud and so on. My responsibility is just the core decisioning products. So that's Blaze Advisor and Decision Modeler products. Most interesting use case, what makes something interesting to me is the human aspect more than the technical, to be frank. So I'm going to pick on the use case which I actually introduced last year, but wasn't able to talk about in detail because the customer didn't allow us to, which was Vodafone M-Pesa. This is a platform based on mobile phones, which Vodafone are using to provide financial services to people in Africa who have no bank accounts. They already serve about 50 million people across 7 countries in Africa. They provide them with an account on their phone that they can pay money into and use to pay bills and so on. And our involvement was to use this platform to provide finance to unbanked individuals and small businesses. We're talking very small, short-term loans for very specific personal things. So like a farmer needs to rent a lorry to take his stuff to the market. And as soon as he knows that as soon as he sells it, he can pay it back, but he needs that literally $5. And you can imagine that banks, when they're presented with this sort of prospect of somebody who's got no bank account, no credit file, are not interested in lending somebody $5. So we were involved in trying to produce a system that could provide these affordable loans. And the way we did it was by providing templates that local lenders could use to set up their decision services in a standard structure. So of course our standard structure was using DMN. We set up a standard template for the decision structure for their lending decisions. Each lender specifies their own rules to their lending strategy, and then our system goes out to this marketplace of lenders and uses it to get a competitive quote for the loan, which is then offered to the customer. Been very successful and changing people's lives, which I think is an unusual thing to feel that you're doing in this industry. On the technical side, it was interesting though, because we had to come up with a new score based on non-banking information and affordability metrics based on phone use and so on. So, and then these templates. So yeah, so that was the most interesting project over the last year. New facilities. Well, we've followed the main trends that we've all been talking about in terms of architecture and authoring facilities. So we've been moving towards a fully cloud-based platform while still supporting on-prem solutions, integrating all our products better, so we can cross-use analytic models or optimization models within decision models and so on. And on the authoring side, we've completely redesigned our authoring environment. We've provided Business Service Manager. We provided support for DRDs, which link to decision entities in our products. There's a lifecycle management and so on. I won't go on too long, but yes, we're addressing all of the main themes that this conference has been discussing.
Okay, no, that's good. And yeah, I think the example, I'm loving the use cases so far. It's just like one is like, it's Williams is like very sort of magnificent, this thing going across the ocean. And then yours is dealing with this very down to earth, like get some money to people into the hands of people who need it. So I think these are great examples. Gary, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's been happening with things at Oracle?
Sure. Can I share my screen or?
Hang on, I will need to stop sharing and I will have to make you a co-host so we can do that. Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, great. So what's new at Oracle? I just picked sort of 5 things. Oracle is also huge, as you know. Oh, there we go. And so I just picked 5 things from sort of a very vast portfolio. And these are just sort of my opinion. I don't officially, not an official spokesperson for Oracle, but I am an official employee. So process automation, that's our BPMN Plus product that we've been re-implementing to use all of the latest cloud implementation techniques, microservices and whatnot. All of the user interfaces are homegrown and conform to our new user experience guidelines. The decision service is something that I worked on back when I was working full-time on DMN. The BPMN and CMMN engines are now based on open source, though, however. Intelligent Advisor formerly was the Oracle Policy Automation, which was an acquisition of RuleBurst some, 8-10 years ago. So that's also moved to the cloud and supports decision services. It used to just be desktop and decision tables. And that's has a natural language interface. Its origin was marking up policy documents, and it works with backward chaining. So it's really meant for kind of question and answer. Give it a question, it works backwards and tries to ask the relevant questions to collect the relevant data. So given that, it was fairly easy to integrate with Digital Assistant. As Jan's students were saying yesterday, backward chaining is handy to avoid asking people for irrelevant data. Everybody has a COVID story. So we've got a couple of systems, a couple of apps. One, the therapeutic learning system, which is for practitioners to collect data on what's working and what's not. The vSafe is for recipients of vaccines to report rare adverse side effects. And both of those give data to the CDC for further analysis. And there's a couple of chatbots. One's customizable so that companies can have a chatbot to answer their employees' concerns about measures the company is taking for COVID. And similarly for higher education, are you supposed to show up for class or is everything virtual? There's been a lot of progress in our portfolio in the cloud for AI and machine learning, a data catalog that tracks where your training data is coming from, which is very important for building models. And then a lot of open source, again, Jupyter notebooks for building and training and testing models, and the functions project for deploying models as a service. And then last, something I don't know much about, but I find very interesting, over the past 6 or 7 years, there's been a lot of acquisitions in the advertising space to target ads, to measure their effectiveness, to prevent fraud, detect when robots are viewing ads rather than people in an attempt to try to get paid for it. And that is serving 43 billion requests a day. So just a smattering of the things that Oracle is involved in.
Okay. Did you have a kind of a favorite interesting use case that you've seen of any of your products related to decision services in the past year or so? Something that that was just really caught your interest?
Nothing I can really talk about. I'm only allowed.
You could tell us, but then you'd have to kill us, right?
I'm only allowed to say things that have been released. So,
right.
Maybe some of the COVID things, or the chatbots are kind of cool. The chatbot integration with Intelligent Advisor for, making it easier to access decision services by the casual conversation is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, good. No, that's excellent. Okay, so next up is Carlos from SparklingLogic. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you guys have been doing and what's coming up?
Yes, hi. So hello, everybody. I'm Carlos. I'm CTO for SparklingLogic. Been in this business for a long time. This year, well, we've seen a bunch of interesting stuff. One that basically is particularly special, let's put it that way, is a fairly large project in China, which is geared towards supporting security and fraud across a consortium of lenders. And we're talking here, like Alan was describing, we're talking micro-lending, we're talking very small amounts. At the same time, we're talking very fast decisions. So these are decisions that to take place in terms of lending in 60 seconds or less. And in a world where, and this being China, where you have on one hand, it's the Far West, there's no credit bureau, so to speak. So it's not like you're going to get a nice credit built up credit report on the people. At the same time, completely wild changes in policy from the government and things of that nature. So the reason why this is interesting is that the way to approach this kind of situation is very dynamic. We end up supporting right now probably close to 1,000 micro decisions in order to make a global decision around whether or not a particular loan needs to be can be approved and at which level it can be approved and from which lenders it can be obtained. So it's a very large number of micro decisions. They're all relatively small, managed by different entities, different people, and with a significant rate of change. Some of these things are things that in other worlds like FICO we would call variables or attributes that they call decisions. So they are essentially just a calculation. Some of them are more complicated, but they do change at a very, very frequent pace. And keeping track of all that has one of the key challenges for people like us who come from worlds where the data is more structured, are more stable on one hand, and where decisions are heavy, they're structured to be heavy, and they're heavily tested. This is really a big change. So on one hand, the ability of the platforms to support a large number of micro decisions assembled in a very dynamic way into decisions is one challenge. A second big challenge is how do I understand what it is that I built? So, and how do I make sure that whenever I need to do an update, the update is going to be safe. It's going to yield the results that they expect. And if not, I'm going to know early enough that that the update is likely to break or has broken something already. We think, I mean, it's an interesting, the other reason why it's interesting is that, and again, I'm talking here as an old timer in this business, is that China doesn't really have an old culture of decision management or business rules management. So you don't really have in there preconceived ideas or a lot of baggage in terms of, I want to see my decision structured this way or this other way. So they, in their perspective, or what they look at in terms of decision management, is a combination of a number of things. So we've talked here about, about models and variables and decisions, Java code, Python code, all those things end up being assembled into decisions. So some of them are quite complicated. So I do think, taking a step back, that all of us vendors here, will deal with this in the long run, and we'll have to incorporate in our thoughts. And I know most of them, or all of you, and all of us have already done it, have started doing it. These new trends in terms of little functions, little lambdas, little things that are out there made available as services that you can leverage and then pull together into larger decisions. So that's the most interesting case. I know there have been many, many others, but in terms of the challenges presented and the difference with respect to the traditional heavy-duty decision applications that you see in Europe or in the US, this was refreshing, let's put it that way, in a different fashion. So in terms of, to your second question, in terms of changes that we've done or that we see coming, I mean, there, in terms of what I can talk about, they are reactions to these kind of things. So at the first level, we've invested significantly in developing what we call business applications. So business applications are essentially ways or mechanisms to provide interactions for users that you're not going to train. Users that are going to be provided with a link, and they're going to be told, here's the way you configure the pricing table. Here's the way you will configure this risk score or this risk threshold and stuff of that nature. These are people who are not going to go through a DMN training, who are not going to think in terms of vocabulary or stuff like that. They're just simply going to interact with with simplified user interfaces. There are lots of them. And the way those user interfaces need to be architected, and I really emphasize the word need here, is the way they're used to work, so that there's no break in their flow typically. And this is not just updating decision logic, it has to do also with lifecycle management, with simulation, even with maintenance of reference data, things in that world that are all part of the way you manage a decision globally. So that's a heavy investment that we've done as part of the product. The second aspect has to be with extending the notion of model ops to decision ops, essentially. Basically, having built into the platform the abilities to very simply track and follow the models that you deployed or decisions that you deployed. There's no real difference at the end of the day. One fits into the other, so that you understand what it is that you have out, who owns it, how to move, how to update them, what's the implication if I were to change it, which one is going wrong, which one is going wrong and pulling the rest down, that kind of stuff. And the third thing, and I will end with that, I realize I'm a little bit long here. The third thing has to do with, and we've talked a lot about data, and there were talks about databases. I enjoyed those discussions quite a lot. We keep seeing this recurrent thing. This hasn't changed, it's not new, but it doesn't go away. A lot of the business rules that we see are already encoded in databases. And we see with the move to the cloud and with the move to non-SQL databases, what we're seeing is an effort now to extract out of those databases that decision logic and put it in a form that can be managed. And it's a really nice technical exercise. The challenge remains always the same. the users who manage that logic don't want to see it in another way than they're actually currently seeing it. So you are faced with the challenge that you're moving logic out of the database, but the interactions have to remain sort of the same for the project to be successful. So we've done investment in those areas.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carlos. Denis, can you tell us a little bit about some interesting use case that you've seen in the past year or so, and then what kind of new things that that you're adding to your products? Mute.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, rather than talking about necessarily specific thing, some of the topics that were present in the conference the last couple of days are some of the very interesting things we're seeing on clients. A lot of things related with system of engagement, everything from chatbot as system of engagement to different ways of engaging with end users. For example, one of our clients, behind the Trisotech platform, we have a broad platform too that does everything from business architecture to operations. And behind this, we have a semantic graph that captures everything and interrelates everything. So some of our clients, a lot of our clients are using that, but one of our clients in particular is using that, injecting information into the graph so they can dynamically generate the user interface on the fly as they're interacting with clients. So that's pretty much one of the furthest advanced use that we've seen of our platform, I think, and it's exciting this year. Another category that we see a lot of things happening that are geeky interesting, not application interesting, is the whole biz DevOps, some of the things that Jacob alluded today, how to integrate this new way of doing things. Because personally, I've always seen the work that we've been doing for the last 20 years, 25 years on BPMN and XPDL before that I was involved in XPDL, BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. I've always personally seen this as the next level of abstraction to which we want to bring kind of coding or specifying operations. And so we're seeing that we're getting to that level now, because even the software developers are now interested in having tooling like BPMN to orchestrate and DMN to decide. That generation of coders has been raised on libraries, which the previous generation didn't want to deal with and know. So I think this is bringing a lot of interesting use case. In terms of new things that we're bringing forward, we've been pretty much bleeding edge from the beginning. So we already have a containerized, cloud-based, API-first type of microservice platform that runs everything. So we're at the level now where we can containerize a single process or a single decision, which can then be scaled horizontally or vertically. And that's used a lot in situations where connection may not be available. So there's a lot of different contexts. You can think in agriculture, when you're in the middle of the field, sometimes connection may not be there, or in some kind of military setting where maybe the connection is not always available. So our current interest is much more on the semantic side of things. We've already integrated BPMN, CMMN, and DMN pretty deeply. All expression in BPMN and all expression in CMMN and the Trisotech platform uses the field expression language. And that's opening the door with a big question mark in our head. Should we push DMN completely through that little door of expression language? Because then you may bastardize the separation of concern. And that's where we're playing. There's a lot more work on everything that has to do with semantics. My presentation this year was much more about semantic. I've been interested in healthcare in the last 4 or 5 years, a lot more. We've created more than 1,000 clinical pathways for healthcare. And the challenge there is that to make it really a shareable clinical pathway, it has to be a fully semantical package so that it can be understood and used properly in the right context. And there was another presentation on sepsis today that referred to all these problems. And during my presentation, Bruce Bray from Veteran Health raised the issue of the fact that in healthcare, you either have not such good data or you're not sure of what was meant. So you're always into this, this kind of situation, which makes it very interesting in terms of challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think your point, one of your earlier points about and you were alluding to some other things we've been talking about how this generation of developers is used to the idea of not having to build everything from like machine code, right? So, you and I are like old coders, right? So it's like we build everything from scratch. And I think there's a few others here that are like that. And then when you started like, oh, well, you have to use this library or these models, the idea of moving to model-driven development and API and library-driven development has been a shift for a lot of people. So, but that's definitely going to help this stuff take off. So
15
okay,
years
Larry.
ago, 15 years ago, you'd go into a meeting where it was mostly IT and IT architect. They didn't want to know anything about models and pictures. They wanted to code everything in literal. Now they see it as an advantage to accelerate time to market. So it's a big change.
Whereas I just want to know how you're going to do DMN in 4chan. So. Okay, Larry, I'm so glad you could join us. Do you have some thoughts for us on, an interesting use case that you've seen and in the last year or so, and what kind of new capabilities that you're coming out with? We can't hear you, Larry. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Maybe you have a microphone not connected properly. Okay, why don't we move on and then we can sort out your problems there. So Jacob, do you want to give us a little bit from your side, or do we want to skip over to Mario and sort of why don't we do that? Why don't we skip over to Mario, and because Jacob's already given one presentation today, so so we'll go to you guys if you can unmute yourself and.
So hi, Mario Fusco from Red Hat. Together with me, there's my colleague Daniele Zonca. I'm the project lead of Rules, and I will let Daniele to introduce himself when I left him the word. About the first challenge that we will see this year, it's something. I wanted to bring a use case related to our current situation with COVID. You saw the presentation this morning of Geoffrey Desmet on Optaplanner. We collaborated with him. Of course, Optaplanner is based on rules internally. It uses rules to do all the reasoning and pattern matching that he needs, and he created a very nice application based on Optaplanner and rules to schedule the COVID vaccination. As far as I know, this application has been used for sure in Belgium, where Geoffrey is based, and in Ireland, but probably also in other countries. I'm not sure. Anyway, we had to deal with millions of reservations for different people to try to get vaccinated. And what we did with the help of Geoffrey of Optaplanner, what we did is trying to schedule the perfect vaccination schedule for everybody, for doctor and patient. So this has been a challenge this year, and it also helped us to feel ourselves useful in this situation, which is not so common. At least I felt a bit important some days, so it has been nice.
It's nice to be able to apply the technology for something as important as this. Yes.
Yeah, definitely, yes. Daniele, you want to go on?
Okay, I'm Daniele, still working at that.
I'm more focused on trusted initiatives, so about explainability and all the additional capability that you need when you mix ML and decision management. To add to what Mario said, let's say it was definitely a good use case. It was possible in this case to help people, showing how a similar technology can solve this issue, but even more, it can be applied to, I would say, a lot of other use cases that have similar constraints. So, for example, hospital had to schedule dedicated scheduling to avoid that doctor that are working in a department where that maybe was specific for COVID cannot be in another one in the next 2 weeks or similar, or even just planning the table in a restaurant because now you needed to keep some distance between them. So we still have impact on the current situation, but trying to help to, let's say, normalize and move forward. It's a very good application of decision management technologies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that sounds great. Larry, are you able to? Were you able to get something?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Great. I'm sorry about that. This last year has been a pretty hectic year for us. From a business perspective, we expanded significantly our activities in the insurance world because our parent is in insurance. It was just strange that for so many years we've principally been in the financial services space. So it's been pretty busy for us in the last year. But the focus has been to launch our new version 7 product, which has got a completely new interface. It's built to be cloud native, re-architected pretty much from the ground up, very substantial new testing capabilities, and uses a notation that's very similar to DMN. It's based upon the DMN notation, although we don't support several aspects of DMN. In particular, we don't support field, but our models would be very easily recognizable now to a DMN modeler. So that's been the principal focus. And our cloud native capabilities will enable us to do, function as a service, which we're already doing for some clients. And I suppose 50% now of our client base is on the cloud, and we're targeting to get to 100%. Certainly all our new clients are cloud-based. The most exciting development for us in the last year has been, and this is the use case I want to talk about, our ALE product, which is automated logic. So what we do is we're able to take code, COBOL, Java, and several other flavors of several other languages, and extract the logic from them in an automated fashion and turn them into decision models. And we thought that the opportunity was to process all these old massive COBOL applications that are out there. It turns out to be more interesting and more exciting for our clients to actually extract the logic out of their large homogeneous store-bought applications that are doing their insurance processing or their mortgage processing, extract the logic and turn those into external services. And that's been incredibly successful. We built this technology from the ground up as a cloud native, and we're hoping to make the entire process entirely automated and self-service as we move forward. But we've had some very successful initial projects, and the projects are getting large and very exciting. And so that's been a big focus of the last year. That's about what our year has been. It's been busy.
That's good. That's good. Busy is good. Jacob, do you want to just give a little background on any kind of use cases that you've seen, and then we can open up for more general questions after that.
Okay. Today I already presented one use case that we can see on different customers, especially our large enterprise customers who are deeply in CI/CD world, using different pipelines and just want our services to be good citizens of this world. And so we successfully added to our product these capabilities, and I described that our advanced business glossary is the right place for this. And on product itself, we recently added a graphical explorer. And what is different from all other vendors, it's not only allows people to build DRDs, but it automatically builds these DRDs whenever you change, for example, decision table in Excel and save it. You can see immediate changes and automatically discovered relationship between different business knowledge models inside your DRDs. And one of feature that our customers really like, it's a business-oriented debugger. I always wanted to have it, and with a new product what we redesigned 3 years ago, it gives us extremely powerful ability to react to every events and during execution, and we built a very powerful and very, very friendly debugger. I'm going to present this on Business Rules Forum this year. And I just also can mention 2 more features for people talk about data quality and use of rules and data quality. Larry in particular was very specific how he was surprised several years ago how frequently decision models use for this. And some of, at least we had 2 real use cases when people wanted to get rid of SQL, but not completely. They could not, they had hundreds and hundreds of very complicated queries, and they wanted to migrate them to rules, but still how to do it. So we allowed it, we extended rules with special tables that basically have inside the SQL. It goes against our logic. We did not want rules to talk to database, but in this particular case, it was important to have the same service that can do data quality validation. And this, the same similar things we did with machine learning when we implemented rule loaner.com. You can check it, available online as SaaS products that you don't have to download or install anything. You just can uploading one Excel file with your historical data and select what algorithm you want to use, and rule loaner generates for you rules that can classification rules that can find certain patterns in your data. Probably that's one of the simplest ML tool available today. And on user sides, I would mention one strange thing. We can see more and more our users using our product without us. This is, I think, it's a very good characteristics. They sometimes ask, for example, we saw one probably not so exciting, but normal things when software developer for vessel loading systems that in production, they consider their system become too complicated, so they took OpenRules, and we just help them to do recursive container loading on vessels. And to use rules for this, it was fun. And so there are several more interesting situations, but I would say that we really decision modeling achieved the state when it becomes, I would not say commodity, but commonly accepted tool. And that's what probably other vendors also experience. And this is a good thing what we can confirm on this annual conference. And finally, about future, we really rethinking concept of knowledge repository. And this is something big, and I don't, so we all basically the same from this perspective so far. And we had several ideas how to change this. That's why I'm so glad that we close with RuleML, and we're working with them together. And from these two keynotes, what we heard is very important thing. So that's about it.
Okay, great. So we can open up for any questions from the audience, or if any of you have questions for each other or any points that you want to discuss. I don't think we need to be too formal about it. We probably have like another 5 or 10 minutes, however long we want to spend here, but certainly feel free to ask each other questions about some of the things that you've heard so far, and I'll monitor for things from the audience.
I decided to pick up on a point that Jacob just made there, actually, about the commoditization of DMN. Yes, it is a little bit scary from a vendor's point of view, but actually what we've done is provided a common way of working where the world can actually develop skills and expertise in a movable workforce, and people can actually, as consultants, can offer these skills and work with other people without having to develop all these things from scratch. I think that's a hugely advantageous thing, even apart from the tools.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's been one of my big push over the years for the adoption of standards, PPMN, CMMN, and DMN, is that availability of workforce that is exchangeable and attainable instantaneously. Because as somebody walks out, you can hire somebody else that knows DMN and they can jump right into the project.
Yeah, the idea of interoperability isn't just important for the vendors to be able to have this interoperability between products. It's really about the companies that use, the organizations that use these things, is to be able to have, first of all, like you say, the workforce, and then also even within their own company, they might have multiple products that are your competing products, but that are maybe doing different aspects of it, and want to have the same sort of language that's used between each of these products. So the interoperability is important for all of those reasons.
So one pattern that we've seen a lot, and I don't know if the other vendors are seeing that pattern, we're seeing a lot of our prospect and interested parties and clients coming from the new revolution side, so the fintech, the mortech, and the medtech, or whatever the tech word is, looking for MVP type of developments, a rapid MVP. We're actually internally we're fighting with how to name that. The bad name that comes to mind is always rapid application development, but we don't want to say that word. But there's a lot of this where people see model-driven type of development as being a way to accelerate access to market. And I don't know if the others have seen that.
Definitely,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
topic of that kind of citizen developer, I think, is something that's on the front of mind for every organization, both the vendors and on the customer side. Yeah,
Denis, I mean, absolutely. We're seeing exactly the same thing. We're seeing actually competition to us altogether from the low-code platforms. The low-code, no-code platforms, they talk the same talk. Up to a large extent, and they do some of the same things that we do. And Sandy, you mentioned the citizen developer, the citizen analyst. Absolutely, I mean they do appear in the picture. Now, coming together with that come also unreasonable expectations. I don't know if you see that, Denis, but we're talking to a prospect who wants to do a completely on origination system in 6 months. Starting from nothing with no funding. I mean, that's the kind of thing that the dream of the low-code platform gives them, essentially. We're going to be able to pull this off. Well, in the end, a lot of, I do think that all of us will be working with, in conjunction with or part of, platforms of that nature. It's a new RAD, as you said, Denis. Absolutely.
Yeah, and to your point on the expectation. We're seeing a lot of expectation on system of engagement. I've just captured all my logic. Why can't I just have the system of engagement for free out of this? And so there's a lot of expectation. So that's why the talks that we've seen in the last few days using chatbot, using different ways of interacting with users so that we don't have to fold into a particular application framework is interesting. And I think we're going to have to look a lot at how do we expose all this insight that we can generate with our systems in different mode, different modal, and different ways of interacting. If I was in a BPM conference or more on the process side, I'd say the task list is dead. It should have never existed. And I think with DMN, we're in a similar, or with decision system, we're in a similar context where people don't want to log in yet another system to interact with that particular logic. They want that logic to be available everywhere, how and where they interact.
Well, and Denis, it's interesting. It's like one of the things we saw in the presentation yesterday was about the chatbot that was generated from the DMN, and the idea that we can generate an executable system from the model. Like you and I have been through that with BPMN. It's just that the vendor sold the dream of, oh, you just have to draw the model and then you will have, this magical executing system. And unfortunately, it doesn't quite work that way, in part because the system is more than just the model. There's also user experience, and we're not dealing with just one kind of model either. It's, there needs to be multiple types of models. There's linkages to other systems and so on. So there's like a lot of things that don't fit in that. But I think we can get partway there. And definitely one of the values that I see of that paradigm in the process world, and I don't know if it's the same in the decision model world, is that you can at least get to the prototyping stage that way. You can at least say, well, have somebody build the model, and then that's going to create a, maybe somewhat not fully functional, a little bit crude application, whether it's a chatbot or whatever, but then we have a place to start from.
I can't resist the temptation to say that actually was the whole point of the DRD. I mean, it was designed, it was intended as a way to define the requirements for systems very quickly and simply, and then gradually fill them in with detail. And that's the joy of a DRD, is that you can specify as much or as little of it as you want, and you can use the bits you've specified and work on the bits you haven't.
Yeah, you should enjoy Alan, because it's actually happening.
Yeah.
And I would bring another point what certainly changed a little bit our life as vendors. It's technical support. With all these remote sessions, it's changed quite dramatically. For example, I used to travel a lot, and now I was only on one on-site trip. And we almost have no on-site trips, but we got the only serious change. It's not anymore our support hours really became 24/7, and because we have to support people in Australia or in Singapore, in Japan, and this is we should adjust to their time. And people take this for granted. And so sometimes we have meetings at 5 a.m. and it became normal. But as a result, we also, people not scared anymore that we are Americans, or we still provide non-local support like local. And probably you have the same things, but the expectations change. That's what's interesting. And even when you're talking about POC, 3-4 days development of serious POC, not just a toy, becomes normal. And this is, and we can see that people just when they come to us, and when they fill out our request for demo, they already have pretty high expectations, and we're really satisfying them. And it becomes kind of, again, I'm coming to the body about commodity, but whatever Denis said, about Alan said, I think as a community, we should feel much better today. Remember, like 4 or 5 years ago, we asked question how long DMN will live. Forever, or it's not, and do we need the DMN 2.0? DMN contributed to our common efforts to bring decision modeling and today probably decisioning in general to a new level, and it's just fact of life, and probably you would agree with me. Yeah.
I do agree, Jacob. I'd still rather have the business trips.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of miss getting on the airplane sometimes, but
just
and,
nothing.
And you know, and seeing everybody in person too. Like, you know,
Yeah.
think about how conferences have changed. Is we're here, and you talk, Jacob, about expectations. Is, you know, we have people here who are sitting at home at 11 o'clock at night on the call, and you know, when we start first thing in the morning, it's 6 in the morning for the people on the West Coast. So it's just, you know, we're kind of in the middle, so it's a little bit easier for us, but it's the same thing. I've been doing European conferences where I get up at 4 in the morning so I can be there for the keynotes in the morning. So we start to lose that idea that, oh, well, if people aren't present, then that means that they might not be able to participate in the same way, in that same synchronous manner that we're used to.
Yeah. And also it's much easier communication between developers, support, DevOps. Right now, I can see that Mario is sitting with Daniele together, and this is kind of a luxury. Probably they live not far from each other, but you can have the best advice from your developer to get anytime you want. And this is kind of world what Ron Ross is talking about, flashpoints. We just live in constant flashpoints, and we have an event streaming platform available just by default. And it's just during even this conference, I got twice interrupted by developers. Oh, sorry, I forgot, but we quickly discussed this. Nobody knew about this, and we continue, and he's doing his work. And this is again probably positive things, but probably one negative thing. I think we're working much harder than we used to. I always thought that we work hard, and now we're working even harder.
So let me ask a sensitive question, which may be less popular, but do we really feel that DMN is winning the war? I mean, I see the same faces here. I don't adoption globally of DMN. I don't see a huge user base of, you know, field practitioners. It's the same faces that I saw 5, 7, 8 years ago. Very few new ones that you know, but so am I missing a point here or something? I mean, I'm not complaining. Our business is good. We're making real progress and so on and so forth, but actually, it's an honest question.
Actually, it's not exactly true. You can see changing guards. For example, you saw new people from different companies like Corticon, for example, today we listened. But I think it's much better instead of us vendor. Let's ask Mark Woods. Let's ask our customers, what do they think about this? Mark, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to offer an industry perspective on that. Certainly, I'm seeing an increase in adoption within our own company, and I think increasing awareness at senior leadership levels, which is definitely a change from 3 years ago. But I don't think I can say any more than that.
Yeah, I would also be mindful, Larry, that these gatherings are much more about, or well, not necessarily intentful, but much more about the vendors and what they're doing in terms of innovation, rather than about the practitioners. And by that, I mean the broad practitioners. I mean, I can attest of at least one country where there's more than 500 people developing with feel in the government. So that, and that's a small number, but if you compile that everywhere, I think, and the discussion we were having before about the fact that you can have people walk in with that knowledge, that's a very important piece that companies are now looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I mean, I'm just asking the question, Denis, because, you know, we see a lot more, you know, the analysts are now talking about decision management, and decision management is becoming, I think, more broadly accepted. But, you know, in terms of practitioners, I mean, they're probably, you know, I don't know how many millions of Python users today, and Python wasn't but a gleam in somebody's eye when we started down this path. So yeah, I accept that, but I still think that we're not doing the work that we should be doing in terms of bringing broad acceptability and broad acceptance of the standard. It's just a thought.
It's kind of a question of whether it's reached critical mass or not, and enough to
yeah.
I think there is another aspect, and again, you know, we do support DMN 1.3 and etc. And we do have a few customers who are looking at it or who are working with it, some of them heavily. But I have to say, and this may be related to Larry's point, a significant number of them look at it on the modeling side, pure modeling side, not the implementation side. Essentially, it allows them to clear up their ideas. It allows them to refine what they really mean and to establish that dialogue with the people who provide the data, people who provide all the other decisions, all the other elements that go into a decision. When you go into implementation, you suddenly, DMN comes with its own syntax, its own language, and that becomes a barrier. And we've seen it. We see it relatively regularly. So I would say DMN is actually quite successful on the decision modeling side of the house. On the implementation, I'm sure that it is successful for those who choose to go that path, but we see that barrier. The second aspect has to do with portability. We say, yeah, it's portable, but you know, really, you know, have we really tried to take you know, a model created deeply with vendor A and run it on vendor B? I can tell you, our prospects have, and we don't pass the test. We simply don't. And a lot of it, if not the majority, has to do with feel. Has to do with the details of implementing, of actual implementation, which is a programming work. So I think that would be my take on it.
Yeah, I think Carlos is very close to where I am on this. I mean, we do not support feel, and we were not that crazy about the idea of feel when we had the debate at the beginning, and there's so many different aspects of implementation of DMN. We've seen DMN vendors that really adopt and perfect and exude feel, as you know, and live and breathe feel. Others that use DMN just as a modeling tool at high level conceptual phase, and others that have the mixed approach. We, you know, our approach, we've stuck with TDM, and we tend to focus on just the model, just the pure model, and not the code. So, I mean, as I look across the spectrum, there's this broad differentiation happening, and I just think it's going to be hard to get that kind of critical mass with this kind of divergence.
But I think we have seen similar things in the history of BPMN, and Denis, of course, you've been right in the thick of this, where there are many companies that just use it as a modeling and communication tool, documentation tool. They don't use it for automation or for execution. And BPMN is like how many years ahead of DMN in terms of when it started, so that you kind of have to look at that acceptance curve. And again, it wasn't until the BPMN 2.0 where they brought in the underlying execution semantics that it then started to be like, oh yeah, you can really take something executable and move it from one vendor's product to another. But would anybody ever do that? And so I think we're seeing there might possibly be some lessons to be learned from the history of BPMN, in that there will likely be many organizations, both on the vendor and the customer side, who never adopt it as anything more than a documentation and analysis tool, and don't move to automation with it.
I think that's a very good observation, and I'm pretty open to it. I mean, that would be the very best outcome, I think, the broad acceptance of the modeling approach, and if people were to express their desires for logic in that fashion, that would be a win for everybody, I think. But honestly, I have this innate skepticism born of being at this for 12 years now, 14 years since we started the modeling, the model. Every new client is a campaign. It's a campaign. And we were roundly criticized, I think, by Mark several years ago in this forum for not really getting broad acceptance at the business level, in the executive suite. And we still haven't done that. We don't have recognition at an executive level of the importance of decision management and its application as a business tool. So anyway, that's just my 2 bits.
Going back to questions of standards and implementation, somebody made the point, people don't code anymore, right? They take libraries, typically open source libraries, and integrate them, right? And I think open source has really replaced, in some respects, the role of standards organizations, right? I mean, you can think of standards organizations like OMG as being a kind of a waterfall, where you spend some years putting together the spec, and then people kind of go off and work other implementations, competing with each other to put in, the killer feature. And meanwhile, like say the machine learning community you mentioned with Python, they're sharing their Python libraries, and they're not doing it waterfall. They're doing it in a more agile fashion. And I think there's a lot to learn from that model.
I think you've made a very good point there, Gary. I think there's a lot to learn from that.
Now, we've had a comment from Matteo on Slack, and I think he's stirring the pot a little bit, but he says, do we really have DMN interoperability without feel? So if we want commoditization and DMN conquered the world, we need to clarify what we mean.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's correct. Without feel, you're not going to have interoperability. It's just that for ourselves, for us as a company, we don't feel that need to adopt feel, and we're just not going to do it. Because we think that it is it's an impediment to widespread adoption. That's just how we are. I mean, our brothers would have been accepting, I don't know, something that was already there, or even an open source solution.
It's throwing me back to the old XPDL versus BPMN discussion of 20 years ago.
But we're 20 years on. We're 20 years on. We're in an open source world.
Yeah. Well, that argument I totally agree. So, but don't confuse the standard with the way the standard was created. So certainly, right. I agree with Gary that we need a much more agile way of creating standards, but I'm certainly not gonna say SDOs, you know, all the standard development organization are good and should be used. They all have their own problems and everything. But as was brought up in conversation today, you know, going back to the Chicago fire about the fire hydrant not having the right connectors to the electrical history before. Now, maybe the connectors doesn't have to be as precise as they used to have to be, and we have a much more loosely coupled view, and we can encapsulate things. You know, with the modern microservice architecture and all this, you can encapsulate things, isolate them, and bring them out. So I think we have to look at what brings value. Now, we find that Phil is as good an expression language, if not better as any. We find it better than what Excel provide in its own expression language. We find it better than what XPath provide. So now, does it have to be the only one that rules them all? I don't think so. Does it have a lot of value? I think it does. And it does in the context of a lot of the discussion we had today of trying to stick closer to natural language, trying to bring things to a different semantic level. I think it's a step in the direction. It's certainly not the silver bullet by any means. And Gary, help me here. I feel like I'm the wrong person to push that agenda.
But can I just say, Denis, you make excellent points, and I think everything you've said is correct, except there are several tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Excel users, and there's several tens of hundreds, maybe thousands of, you know, field users. So that's really the trade-off. But, you know, in our experience of doing this reverse engineering or this automatic extraction of these different languages, and there's a host of them that we're working with, and extracting them and then putting them into decision models. You know, one of the things we've learned is that, you know, it's relatively easy to represent these different techniques. And it just seems that language is almost redundant, and it seems that we should be able to do this in a language-less way, which is what the original idea with TDM was. And I feel even more confident of being able to do it now than I was, you know, before we did this. So that's why I'm so I'm very skeptical. Anyway, sorry, Gary, I didn't.
No, I mean, I was going to say that, I mean, I think there's been, you know, the world hasn't stood still, unfortunately, right? While we, you know, started DMN, and, you know, the field of machine translation, right? Primarily what's called seek-to-seek or sequence-to-sequence semantic parsing is, you know, very interesting. And, you know, you can see that with the rise of chatbots, you know, all of your digital assistants, you know, Alexa, Siri, you know, what have you. I think that's really significantly raised the bar. And, you know, I think that, you know, people really are not going to, you know, stop demanding, you know, friendly, you know, more friendly than friendly enough until we really do offer natural language. Now, the problem with that is then they're going to run up, I think, to the limits of their logical understanding, you know, because we've done some experiments where, you know, as soon as you utter, you know, you're fine as long as you utter your first rule. And, you know, my observation is, you know, almost 90% of the time or more, when you utter your second rule, it will conflict or contradict with the first one. And so you have to have a dialogue system that can say, you know, well, you know, you said, you know, always do this, but, you know, yesterday you said, you know, only do it if it's, you know, less than, you know, 20%. So which one do you mean? So, you know, I think we'll get into interesting semantic questions, but the actual syntax, I think, you know, ultimately will be natural language.
And it's also interesting to notice that we've been focused us as a group here on the notion of the system of insight. And less and less people are interested about the system of insight. They're just interested with its the way it shows up in the system of engagement. And that's why I was bringing up the notion of those MVPs and those POCs that are put together fast. We're moving towards a generation of immediate results, immediate satisfaction, immediate gratification. And so we're going to have to, I mean, as we all know, there's still ones and zeros at the bottom of all this, but we don't have conferences about ones and zeros anymore, which we used to have a lot. And so as those level of abstraction are going up, you know, that's the debate we're having now. How do we codify? How does the back system does it? And at one point, we don't care. It's hidden behind layers of abstraction and it doesn't matter. So I think we're going to have success where we're going to be able to reach through the system of engagement and hide the details behind. And certainly DMN is yet another layer of abstraction that will be layered under other layers as we're going to go forward.
Okay. Sandy? Yeah.
Well, I think we don't have any questions from the audience, and we are a little bit over time. Tomorrow we'll be starting up at 9 o'clock Eastern time again, so the same time, and we'll be finishing a little bit earlier. We won't have the keynote in the middle as we have had yesterday and today with from the Declarative AI conference. So it'll just be our presentations and no panel tomorrow. And then I think at the end of the day there will be some closing remarks. And there will be a open discussion where you can bring your own beverages if you'd like to do that. So that would be a good opportunity for everybody who wants to stick around and just have open discussions. We can do that. So
sure, that was just a visual aid, Sandy. Not a.
Oh, I know. I just
it's not a real glass of wine.
No, of course not. No. Very good. Nice Sauvignon Blanc, but you know, anyway, drinking Canadian wine even, yes. So yes, let's finish it off for today, and we'll see you all in the morning then. Thanks for being here, and thanks to all of you for participating on the panel.
Thank you, everybody.
Good seeing you all again.
Thank you.